America just lost a war. America just lost a war, and they're pretending like this stuff never happened. They're avoiding it. They're moving on. They've already forgotten the 13 American service members whose lives were needlessly lost. We have terrorists running an entire country. Terrorists. We went to war with them. They won, we lost. And we see Joe Biden, the president. He humiliated himself. He's helped humiliate our country, damage it. And this is not ancient history. This is a matter of days ago. And the mainstream media, so eager to continue to protect him, to deny reality, and turn the page to talk about this stuff.
We continue to hear from the president and the White House linking these severe weather events to climate change and trying to personalize that and add a human element to what's really been a scientific argument and discussion for so long. So expect him to just talk about that. Also expect him, as you mentioned, to use this as an opportunity to talk about his infrastructure plan. There's $500 billion in new spending he is trying to get through Congress. In New Orleans, he talked about how that would go to things like levee, new water infrastructure,
I don't care.
Systems.
And you see that nonsense? They're going to, Joe Biden's going to employ the human component, the empathy, right? Where did that get us? Where did that get us? Folks, we have smoking gun proof that Joe Biden lied to all of us, probably lied to the government and who knows who else. That's the Afghan president, former Afghan president, Ghani. And quite frankly, I'm starting to see things his way. I feel like he was screwed by Joe Biden. And now, well, he might have, I don't want to call it the last laugh, but maybe the last word. Have you seen this? A transcript of a phone call between Joe Biden and the president of Afghanistan back in July. I need not tell you the perception that things aren't going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban. And there's a need, whether it is true or not, there is a need to project a different picture. How about that? Whether it is true or not. No, it wasn't true. The Taliban, in fact, was gaining the upper hand. The narrative, the picture, the story doesn't matter, Joe. The facts on the ground do. Forget about the narrative. You had a chance to change the facts, and you didn't. President Ghani responds to Joe Biden. This transcript uncovered by Reuters, by the way. President Ghani says to the president, Mr. President, we are facing a full-scale invasion composed of Taliban, full Pakistani planning and logistical support, and at least 10 to 15,000 international terrorists, predominantly Pakistanis, thrown into this. Ghani asks for help, specifically. Next, Ghani talks about military hardware. What is crucial is close air support. We have prioritized that. If it could be at all front-loaded, we will greatly appreciate it. Now, close air support at that point was essentially gone and wasn't coming back. Close air support is very effective. You need people on the ground directing planes in the air. The bad guy is over there. Go kill it. That's how close air support works. And without that, you could have an army of 500,000, 1 million would be incredibly vulnerable. So President Biden is not under a whole lot of pressure right now, kind of surprisingly so. No one's really demanding answers of what really happened here. He is blaming Ghani, the Afghan president, though. Take a look.
When I spoke by phone to Ghani in July, we had very frank conversations. We talked extensively about the need for Afghan leaders to unite politically. They failed to do any of that. I also urged them to engage in diplomacy, to seek a political settlement with the Taliban. This advice was flatly refused. Mr. Ghani insisted the Afghan forces would fight, but obviously he was wrong.
From what we've seen in the transcript, Joe Biden is lying. No surprise there. We have documented proof of him lying every step of his career. very early on. The guy is why would he stop now? Why would he stop now? But here's where I'm just shocked. Why does the mainstream media continue to cover for this guy when it can't get any worse, but they pretend that all is well?
He has gone out throughout this, and he has spoken directly to the American people several times. He's taken responsibility. He's explaining things. I think that's going to stand him well over time. If that were eroding, then I think you might see a more permanent slide. But, you know, I don't think it's time to conclude that the presidency is hobbled.
The presidency, quite frankly, should be crippled, and people should be calling for impeachment hearings at least. The president came forward and took responsibility. No, he didn't. He blamed Trump. The president, we have, again, proof that he lied throughout all of this, and the media want to just say everything's fine.
The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely. Americans should understand that we're going to try to get it done before August 31st.
But if we don't, the troops will stay.
If we don't, we'll determine at the time who's left.
And
if there are American forces, if there's American citizens left, we're going to stay till we get them all out. The consensus was that it was highly unlikely that in 11 days they'd collapse and fall and the leader of Afghanistan would flee the country. My predecessor, the former president, signed an agreement with the Taliban.
Passing the buck, being wrong, and being dishonest. And they say this is okay. So obviously, they blew it. They blew it. They blew the strategy. They blew the tactics. They blew the planning. And this is a loss. This is a loss. He even messed up the stuff that he's supposed to be good at. Empathy, the counselor in chief. Remember all that stuff during the campaign? This phony moment with the kid who stuttered and suddenly Joe Biden was a lifelong stutterer. That myth, that political myth, Joe Biden and his legendary empathy.
There's nobody in this race who is a bigger difference from Donald Trump than Joe Biden. He's a man of character. He's a man of empathy.
This campaign is going to be a contrast between a man with empathy and a man with no empathy.
What I saw from Joe Biden tonight was someone who showed empathy, someone who understands where we are in America.
That empathy, that decency, the belief that everybody counts, that's who Joe is.
Your empathy has become a trademark of your presidency.
So this is actually the big lie. This is the big lie, that Joe Biden is a nice guy, has empathy, cares about people. He does not, and we are seeing that in dramatic form. The bodies coming home from overseas, 13 of them in caskets, flag draped, somber, reverential, and Joe Biden just can't wait to get out of there. He checked his watch. Not once, not twice, at least 3 times, documented on video and still pictures. This is not fake news. This is not a conspiracy theory. This actually happened. I've been on job interviews where I wouldn't look at my watch. I've been at dinner, I would not look at my watch. He does it in the middle of this. There's something quite wrong. There is. But what is possibly worse, the fake news, never has their phoniness been more apparent, that they would cover for this calamity and Joe not bringing it when it comes to empathy. That somber ceremony I just showed you, the fake news lied about it.
President Joe Biden honoring the fallen. The remains of U.S. service members killed this week in Kabul arriving home to the United States in flag-draped cases. He and the First Lady, along with the Secretaries of Defense, State, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, gathered with mourning families at Dover Air Force Base for hours.
Spent hours with the mourning families. We just saw the moments with the watch. No mention. You know, they killed George H.W. Bush about looking at his watch during a debate in 1992. Stayed with the families for hours. Have you heard by now what the families said about that meeting? That Joe was grossly self-absorbed, bringing up Beau Biden when he should have been focused on the families and their loss? That was a terrible, terrible meeting, apparently. No word. They're just going along with it. They can fool themselves. They can't fool us. Joe Biden, in an effort to change the subject, went to New Jersey, which saw some pretty serious storm damage. It was a photo op, but he got a big dose of what some people are thinking of when they're not thinking about the weather.
Leave ruins and leave Americans behind. Leave Americans behind. He will leave you behind. You guys protected him. Leave you guys behind. That's great. Leave our Americans behind. Ronald Wiltrick buried in Arlington, 2011, December 11th. For what? He lost his life for what?
Those people, whoever they are, yelling out at the president, bless them. They should be, because the media won't. They're so invested in this guy to protect him. This kind of thing will happen again if we don't find out what happened and have some accountability here, right? And are we going to get that from the military? Are we going to get that from the military? Maybe. But first, we got to get rid of this guy.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it.
So when he was trying to understand white rage and showing off to his liberal masters, he should have been focused on what was happening in Afghanistan. And there's clear evidence that he was not, There are only so many hours in the day, you know. You can focus on your job, the military, or focus on being woke. You can't necessarily do both. I don't think you can. And by the way, the lie that Joe Biden told, hey, President Ghani, you and I have got to get on the same lie. General Milley jumped on the phone as well. Take a look at this from Reuters, the transcript. The perception, this is General Milley with the president of Afghanistan, July 23rd. The perception in the United States, in Europe, and the media sort of thing is a narrative of Taliban momentum and a narrative of Taliban victory. And we need to collectively demonstrate and try to turn that perception, that narrative, around. What the hell is a general worried about? Narrative, a story. A general should be concerned about lethality, the enemy, our guys, force protection, military stuff, narrative. And this is the general who says he thought about resigning after this moment. Remember the walk across the street with the president? He was so mortified, he almost resigned. That would have been a big phony baloney audition to be Secretary of Defense under a Democrat, by the way. If he thought about resigning for this, he should definitely resign now. Don't you think this is far more serious? But getting back to what I was talking about, there's only so many hours in the day. Look at what the Pentagon is saddled with right now. Some of the ancillary issues, okay? They got to worry about climate change. They got to worry about Women's History Month. These are things that are now on their list. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. They even have an abbreviation, an acronym, DEI. It pervades everything they do right now. They must consider diversity, equity, inclusion. Extremism in the ranks, finding those white supremacists who are out there. LGBTQ recruitment, that's a biggie. And don't forget trans rights, of course. These things are taking up time, money, attention. I have to show you this. Right when we were losing our troops in Afghanistan, the Sergeant Major of the Army, somebody named Grinston, actually put out this statement, all right? Diversity is a number. Do you have people that don't look or think like you in the room? Inclusion is listening and valuing those people. Women's Equality Day. And he's the top soldier, one of them, in all of the Army, all of it. And this is a trend with this guy and so much of military leadership these days. A few months ago, a very strange Army officer got into a nasty confrontation with cops. The soldier was totally in the wrong. When the cops tell me to get out of the car, I do. When the cops put their lights and sirens on, I pull over. This guy drove for 1.5 miles. And then what happened?
What's going on?
How many occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
Open the door slowly and step out. Open the door.
I'm not getting out the vehicle. What's going on?
Get out of the car.
He just stays there. He blows off law enforcement issuing legitimate commands. This guy, again, drove away from the cops as they were attempting to pull him over. Grinston, the top soldier I just told you about, after this went down and became public, what did he say about this matter? Well, he said this. He represented himself and our Army well through his calm, professional response to the situation. I'm very proud of him. That soldier was arrested, by the way, that night for his incredibly irresponsible actions. He should not be in uniform. So all this looking at equity, inclusion, diversity, trans, all this stuff, I don't think anybody in the Army's leadership is really focused on the mission. Take a look at this from the Army's Chief of Training. Kind of a nice sentiment, sort of. This picture is worth 1,000 words, thanks to these American heroes. Spelled heroes wrong, by the way, and also those aren't American heroes. Those are British heroes. She got that wrong. She couldn't notice that these guys are not our guys. They're allies, but they're not. Wrong country. Right now, Milley and Austin, General Milley and Secretary Austin, they must go, but I don't think they will, because jettisoning these guys will acknowledge failure, and they're committed, Joe Biden is, to classifying Afghanistan as a success. It's not. You know that, and I know that, and it's so ridiculous, so tragic, so sad. We are almost at the 20-year anniversary for 9/11. I was here in New York on that day when people jumped from the towers. People jumped from these towers instead of enduring the hell that was going on inside. And isn't it, I don't know, ironic, wild that 20 years later, people are still jumping, fleeing from American airplanes this time. I can't let this go, and I know you can't either. The media are committed to turning the page. We won't let them. We have to do our part. It's worth it. I'll be right back.